This is the new Tamron 18-300 for Sony APS-C. Let's go test it. Stop number one, we're gonna try and catch some of the swans out on the lake out here, and maybe some of the sunrise at the little cabin that's over there on the shore. All right, spot number two, there's just fantastic reflections off the water, and the sun's just coming up over the mountains over here, so we're gonna grab this with some photos real quick. So we're in Seward. It is a beautiful day here. And right over here is this old boat and a bunch of houses that go down the shore. I think it's gonna be a good time to test and just play with this lens and some like layer stacking and compression with the mountains in the background. So we'll go down the beach, walk down here a little ways, and see what we can capture with this thing. And by the way, Tamron did send this lens to me for review, but they're not paying for this review, and they're not getting to see or have any input into this video before it's launched. So these are my opinions of testing this lens here in Alaska. All right, so first of all, this does have stabilization built in, which is extremely helpful when I'm shooting a longer focal length. So I was shooting some of those at like 200 millimeters handheld, also holding it out like this without the EVF, which really makes a big difference. Just shooting it handheld like this is really a lot more difficult without an EVF. So stabilization works well. I'm surprised how much it helps and how much it adds. And then when you add the active stabilization built into the Sony ZV-E10, yeah, pretty solid combo. I was surprised. Those photos look pretty sweet. The backdrop certainly helps. It's not half bad for a place to try out a lens that will go from 18 millimeters, or what is about 27 millimeters in full frame equivalent, to 300 millimeters, aka 450 millimeters in full frame equivalent, because you're on an APS-C lens.
So does that mean you could shoot like me here and then something across the water?
Exactly. Something cool that doesn't happen very often is Jevin Dovey has been here with me for 5 days, and we've been running all over the state of Alaska, but he's been filming a behind the scenes look at this video and how I make a lot of my videos. So that will be linked in the description. You should definitely go check it out if you want to see a behind the scenes glimpse of what it takes to film tests and reviews here in Alaska. I also want to try out the macro capability of the lens, because from what I understand, you can actually get a really close focal distance at the wide end, which I'm excited to try. Testing the close focus distance of the 18-300 actually got me some really surprising results. Personally, I like the way the bokeh falls off, the out of focus areas fall off. I feel like it's pretty smooth and pretty nice, the transitions. And the fact that you can focus like an inch away or even closer at the wide end is insane. At the long end, you're more like about 2 feet, but then you're at like 300 millimeters, 450 millimeters if you're full frame equivalent, which means 2 feet away, you just completely blow everything out and get some really cool gradients depending on what your background is. But you can do some really creative things with this lens, and it's fun to play with. So this is me just hand holding it, active stabilization on the camera's turned on, and the lens-based stabilization on the lens is turned on too. But I'm using my tripod as a little bit of a selfie stick, so I'm getting it a little further away. It definitely helps. But if we turn active stabilization off, we'll lose that crop factor in the Sony, the ZV-E10, and give you a little bit more field of view. So let me switch that real quick. So now we're in the standard stabilization, which is just the lens-based vibration compensation, what Tamron calls it, which actually works really well. I've used it in the 17-70, and I was super impressed with how well it worked in there. And yeah, it seems to be working pretty well on this one as well. I'm impressed by the image quality coming out of this. The amount of zoom range you get out of this lens is insane. You can zoom so far in and get so tight to something. and still get really nice quality photo and really nice quality video. The one downside is it's not a constant aperture. So it starts at f3.5, which is decent, but not great for low light. And then it goes to f6.3 at the long end. It's not fantastic for shooting in low light, but if you run a Sony camera, they perform fairly well in low light anyway. They have pretty good at high ISO performance. And honestly, most of what you're gonna be shooting with this lens is gonna be in the daylight, out shooting wildlife, maybe shooting some landscapes, point and shoot stuff, street photography. This would be a pretty handy lens because you get a lot of different focal lengths, you get a lot of different uses, including the macro stuff, without having to change the lens out. So it means you can move really fast and get a lot of different options when you're out shooting in a fast moving environment, like if you're on vacation or if you're doing street photography or something like that. Overall value, it is a weather sealed lens. You get a nice little rubber gasket. Tamron's been doing really well with their weather sealing. My lenses have been tested and proven in some really harsh conditions, and they're still going strong. As far as construction, it's constructed like all the other Tamron lenses that have been coming out the last few years for Sony. It's a kind of composite plastic material, which maybe doesn't hold up as well as metal, but I can say from experience, having taken mine everywhere for the last few years and in all kinds of harsh environments, it holds up well. It's pretty simple. There's no autofocus on-off switch. There's no optical image stabilization on-off. You do all that through the camera menu. It is a double extending barrel, which not necessarily bad. I guess it could be potentially a weak point, but in my experience, it hasn't been so far. They do give you a lock switch, which you can lock there, and so the lens won't slide open, which not a super heavy lens, but if you have that off and if you hold the camera up like this, it can start to break loose, especially if you're not all the way back at the 18mm point. As soon as you come out, it starts to get loose. Both on the good and maybe not so good side is the autofocus. The autofocus is really fast, it's very accurate, and it's very quick, especially when you pair it with newer Sony bodies that have great autofocus built in. The one caveat is, and the one downside is when you're working with a super zoom like this and you're zoomed way out at 250, 300mm, it's difficult for the camera to figure out what you're trying to focus on. Normally with a super telephoto lens like this, any really long telephoto lens, you want to have a focus limit switch that will limit it either to where you're doing the full, just everything from close focus to infinity, or you want to set it to where it's, 3 meters out from you or 15 meters out from you, so it gives the camera an idea of like, pretty much all this is far distance or it's still close distance. So when you're using this at the extreme telephoto lens, you might have to help the camera find the focus, and then once it does, it's great. The one gripe I have about it, and that will be something we'll have to see over time, is the zoom ring isn't super smooth. You can kind of feel it change the tension as you zoom in or out. Now, you're going from 18 to 300mm, so that's an insane amount of distance, but you do have to kind of get the feel of how it zooms in or out if you want to try and do some smooth zooming, from 18 to 300mm. Otherwise, it just takes a little bit of getting used to. Now that I've been back in the studio and I've been able to look in depth a little deeper at the photos and video that I shot with this lens, I have to say I'm really impressed. Tamron has done a fantastic job at delivering spectacular performance in a lens that costs $700, which is basically an all-in-one lens that you could buy for APS-C, either Sony or Fujifilm X-mount, and be able to shoot pretty much anything you want to shoot. Definitely the weakest point is the low light performance, but that is something that's going to be really hard to overcome in a lens that will go from 18mm to 300mm. You're just not going to find something that's going to perform amazingly well at low light. But beyond the low light capability, this lens delivers spectacular image quality across the board. They're very sharp, very detailed, just really, really excellent. And with the vibration compensation, even at longer focal lengths, I've found that you can get some really solid video and photo even when you're just working handheld. Now, obviously, if you put it on a tripod, you can go even further and get lower light stuff, especially for photos where you can open or slow the shutter speed way down. But yeah, this lens is a great lens if you're shooting APS-C and you're looking for one lens to get started with that will pretty much cover everything you need for a while, a very long while. Then I can highly recommend this Tamron 18-300. Now, if you're looking for lenses that work really well with Sony cameras, I put together a video right here that goes through some of my favorites and how I like to use them. Click or tap there, I'll see you in one of those videos. As always, if you have questions, ask me in the comments below or join my live stream Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Just got a few miles to hike back home. I'll see you again soon in the next video. Cheers.
And if you want to see a behind the scenes of how he made this video, that's what I'm doing.
Oh, actually,